Given everything loyalty, love, years of silent sacrifice only to receive silence and a husband who never even noticed her fading. And when someone finally saw her, finally made her feel human again, it was the one person she should have been protecting, not reaching out to. It wasn't just betrayal, it was desperation in disguise. And the worst part? No one stopped it. Not her, not him. Just a house full of ghosts watching two souls lose themselves in a false truth. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. And I did. The next day, I found a note on the counter. Thanks for seeing me, it read. That was it. No name, no signature, but it felt like a confession. Like he knew I was carrying emptiness too. Like he wasn't just speaking to me, but for me. And that scared me. Because someone noticing you isn't supposed to feel dangerous. But it did. It felt like standing too close to a fire not burned yet, but far too warm. It was Corbin's birthday the next week. Mark forgot. Of course, mumbled something about a client dinner and promised to make it up to him later. I didn't expect anything different. But I remembered that Corbin once mentioned his mom used to make lasagna for his birthday. Always from scratch, with extra ricotta, because she said it made it taste like a hug. So that afternoon, while Mark was still at work, I rolled up my sleeves and made it, layer by layer, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, intention. The house was quiet when Corbin came downstairs. He froze in the doorway, eyes darting between the candles on the table, the lasagna on the stove, and the bottle of soda I'd chilled because he once said he preferred it over wine. You didn't have to, he started, but his voice caught. He sat across from me, silent for a long beat, then whispered, "No one's done anything like this for me since she passed." His throat tightened. I looked away, afraid if I met his eyes I'd cry too. Dinner was easy, gentle. We talked about music, his writing, random memories, but beneath every laugh, every glance, something pulsed, something neither of us dared to name. Then, as we cleared the plates, he said, "Can I show you something?" He handed me a folded piece of paper creased at the edges, like it had been held too long in his pocket. "It's just fiction," he said, avoiding my gaze. I read it at the table, candlelight flickering, heart thudding. The story wasn't long. It was about a woman graceful, soft-spoken, overlooked, a woman who moved through a house that wasn't really hers, carrying other people's grief and smiles, until someone finally saw her, really saw her, not out of obligation, but out of truth. He never named her, but he didn't have to. When I finished, my hands trembled. I looked up, but Corbin was already gone, disappearing up the stairs with a quiet "Good night." I sat there long after the candles burned out, the note still in my lap, like it might vanish if I let go. I wanted to believe it was just fiction. I told myself that, over and over, but deep down, I knew. On paper, my life should have felt complete. A beautiful two-story home in North Carolina, a husband with a stable job, and quiet dinners lit by soft lighting and habit. But behind the curated calm was a woman fading. I was 38, and despite what the world saw, I was starving, not for food, but for connection, for touch, for someone to look at me and truly see me. My husband, Mark, once made me feel safe. Now he made me feel invisible. He'd come home late, peck my cheek without looking, eat in silence, and fall asleep facing the wall. I'd lie beside him, skin cold against his warmth, listening to the ceiling fan spin like a clock counting down to nothing. I tried God. I tried to revive us. I planned trips, left love notes in his coat pocket, lit candles without reason, but nothing pierced through, and slowly, I stopped asking for affection. I stopped believing I deserved it. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It became my prison, and when I passed a mirror, all I saw was a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore, hollowed out. Polite, and perfectly unseen. That's where it all began, not with betrayal, but with disappearance. It started with a glance, quick, uncertain, but it hit me like a wave I hadn't expected. Corbin had only been back for a week. 20 years old, carrying a quiet weight in his shoulders. He moved through the house like a shadow present, but never imposing. I tried to keep my distance. After all, what was I supposed to be to him? A stepmother he barely knew? A woman married to his emotionally vacant father? But one morning, as I poured coffee in the kitchen, I caught him watching me, not just a glance, but watching, not with desire, not yet, with curiosity, like he was trying to figure something out about me. And I looked back. We didn't speak much, not at first, but the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was charged. When he offered to help me carry groceries, our hands brushed, and I felt it. That bolt, that invisible current that moves through skin and lands somewhere deeper. I laughed it off. He smiled, but the air between us thickened. Not inappropriate, not yet, just alive. Mark was away more than usual. Business trips, late-night meetings. I stopped asking. I already knew the answers. I cooked for two now. And when Corbin lingered in the doorway, asking about ingredients or quietly complimenting dinner, something inside me woke up. One night, he stayed behind after dinner while I washed dishes. He dried them without being asked. Our movements fell into sync like we'd done it 100 times. I asked him how school had been. He paused, looked at me, then said softly, "Hard." Everything felt fake. And then, quieter. "But this doesn't." I didn't know what to say. My throat went tight. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to run. Instead, I nodded and said, "I get that." He didn't just see me. He felt me, and I felt him back. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet. But inside me, everything was loud. I lay in bed beside Mark. His back to me as always. The letter still replaying itself in my head line by line. Every word Corbin wrote clung to my skin like static tender. Deliberate, dangerous. I kept telling myself it was just a story. A harmless outpouring of emotion. But it didn't feel harmless. It felt like truth, and I was terrified by how much of my own truth I saw in it. The next morning, I found Corbin in the kitchen, already pouring coffee. He looked up, smiled softly, and said, "Morning," like nothing had happened, but there was something different in the way he stood. Not shy, not hesitant, present, like he knew something had shifted and wasn't going to pretend it hadn't. We didn't talk about the letter. We didn't need to, but every movement felt heavier. Every look lingered just a second too long. When I reached for the sugar bowl and our hands brushed, I flinched, but not from fear. From awareness. His fingers didn't pull back immediately. Neither did mine, just a breath of contact. But it burned. I busied myself with the dishes, trying to pretend I wasn't unraveling. Corbin leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee, and casually asked, "Did you always want to live here?" I shrugged. I didn't really think about it. I just followed Mark's lead. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You don't seem like the kind of person who follows. You seem like someone who's just been waiting for someone to ask her what she wants." That hit me in the chest so hard I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. Later that day, I found the letter again. I held it in my hands like a confession I hadn't signed but still understood. I wasn't in love with Corbin. Not then, not yet, but I couldn't lie. He made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not lust, not danger, recognition. And it terrified me. Because no matter how I tried to justify it, he was still my stepson. And I was still the woman who was supposed to be the adult in the room. But adults get lonely too. And that loneliness was starting to look a lot like temptation. The tension didn't fade, it evolved. Subtle shifts in our daily routines now felt like choreography. Corbin began appearing more often in spaces I once occupied alone. The kitchen during breakfast. The hallway in the evening. The porch steps just as I stepped out for air. It never felt forced, but it was intentional. We never acknowledged it, but our orbits were colliding. He didn't just see me. He felt me, and I felt him back. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet. But inside me, everything was loud. I lay in bed beside Mark. His back to me as always. The letter still replaying itself in my head line by line. Every word Corbin wrote clung to my skin like static tender. Deliberate, dangerous. I kept telling myself it was just a story. A harmless outpouring of emotion. But it didn't feel harmless. It felt like truth, and I was terrified by how much of my own truth I saw in it. The next morning, I found Corbin in the kitchen, already pouring coffee. He looked up, smiled softly, and said, "Morning," like nothing had happened, but there was something different in the way he stood. Not shy, not hesitant, present, like he knew something had shifted and wasn't going to pretend it hadn't. We didn't talk about the letter. We didn't need to, but every movement felt heavier. Every look lingered just a second too long. When I reached for the sugar bowl and our hands brushed, I flinched, but not from fear. From awareness. His fingers didn't pull back immediately. Neither did mine, just a breath of contact. But it burned. I busied myself with the dishes, trying to pretend I wasn't unraveling. Corbin leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee, and casually asked, "Did you always want to live here?" I shrugged. I didn't really think about it. I just followed Mark's lead. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You don't seem like the kind of person who follows. You seem like someone who's just been waiting for someone to ask her what she wants." That hit me in the chest so hard I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. Later that day, I found the letter again. I held it in my hands like a confession I hadn't signed but still understood. I wasn't in love with Corbin. Not then, not yet, but I couldn't lie, he made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not lust, not danger, recognition. And it terrified me. Because no matter how I tried to justify it, he was still my stepson. And I was still the woman who was supposed to be the adult in the room. But adults get lonely too. And that loneliness was starting to look a lot like temptation. The tension didn't fade, it evolved. Subtle shifts in our daily routines now felt like choreography. Corbin began appearing more often in spaces I once occupied alone. The kitchen during breakfast. The hallway in the evening. The porch steps just as I stepped out for air. It never felt forced, but it was intentional. We never acknowledged it, but our orbits were colliding. He poured tea into a second mug without asking. The cinnamon scent filled the space like memory. I sat at the table, and he joined me, his presence calm, grounding. The storm outside howled, but inside, it was hushed, too quiet. A silence that vibrated with tension. Then, I whispered, "Do you ever feel like you're disappearing?" He looked up, eyes steady. "Every day." I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the storm. The late hour. The ache I'd swallowed for years, but the words came tumbling out. I try so hard. To be enough. To be what I'm supposed to be. I smile. I cook. I keep the house warm, but I don't feel warm. I feel gone. My voice cracked. Shame curling hot in my chest. Corbin didn't speak. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing a tear from my cheek. It was the first time someone had touched me like that, not out of duty. Not out of routine, but out of recognition. And that broke something open inside me. I leaned forward. Maybe he did too, or maybe we both did. Pulled by something we didn't have words for yet. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was trembling, slow, unsure, a question asked in breath and silence. His lips met mine like they were asking, "Are you still in there?" And mine answered, "Yes, God, yes." In the candlelight, with thunder rolling above us, rules vanished, and for one fleeting, forbidden moment, I felt alive. The next morning, the house was too quiet, but not in the usual way. This silence was heavier, charged, like the air after a power surge. I sat on the edge of the bed long before the sun came up. Hands clenched in my lap, heart pounding with the memory of the night before. I could still feel Corbin's lips on mine, the warmth of his touch, the trembling in both of us that said this isn't just loneliness, it's something we can't name yet. But daylight is cruel, and when I finally stepped into the hallway, everything looked too normal. The same hallway, the same carpet, as if the house had agreed to keep our secret, but not without consequence. I didn't see Corbin that morning. I didn't hear his door open or his footsteps on the stairs. I wasn't sure if he'd left early or was hiding like I was. Either way, I avoided the kitchen. I didn't want to see the table where it happened. I didn't want to feel that pull again, the pull that made me forget myself. Around 10, I heard the front door open. Mark was back. His usual cheerful muttering filled the space, about traffic, hotel coffee, and how wild that storm was. He kissed my cheek with a distracted grin. "Thanks for holding things down," he said. I smiled, or tried to, but it felt like my face didn't know how to move anymore. At lunch, Corbin sat across from me like he always had. But this time, he didn't look at me. Not once. Mark talked the whole meal, work updates, some potential promotion, while I nodded at the right times. Chewed my food like it didn't taste like guilt. Corbin stayed silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. But I could feel it, the tension coiling between us. Thick and electric. And that's when the worst feeling hit me, not regret. Not yet. Emptiness. Because the space between me and Corbin had never felt fuller than it did now. When we couldn't even speak. I wanted to know what he was thinking. Did he hate me? Was he scared? Did he want to take it back? Or was he just pretending like I was? Pretending nothing had happened, even though everything had. That night, I lay in bed next to Mark, staring at the ceiling like it might answer for me. He was snoring lightly, undisturbed, as if nothing had shifted in the atmosphere. But inside me, everything had. My body still hummed with the memory of Corbin's hands. His voice. That kiss. I hated myself for feeling it. For wanting it again. But the truth, the brutal, burning truth, was that I did want it. Not just the kiss. Not just the warmth. I wanted him to look at me like that again. I rolled onto my side, facing away from my husband, curling into myself. My skin felt too tight. My thoughts too loud. The shame came in waves, because I wasn't supposed to crave this. I wasn't supposed to feel alive because of someone I should have protected. Not touched. But how could I ignore the part of me that had been dead for years? Every day, I had starved in silence, smiled through neglect, swallowed the ache of not being touched, not being seen. I had played the part of the perfect wife, even when I felt like wallpaper, pleasant, faded, unnoticed. And then, one kiss cracked that role wide open. And now I couldn't go back. The next morning, Corbin was in the kitchen again, already dressed, calm, careful. He poured coffee like it was any other day. But I caught him watching me, just briefly, when I thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't guilt in his eyes. It was something worse. Familiarity. One night, as I passed Corbin in the hallway, our shoulders brushed again, a simple, accidental touch. But this time, we both stopped, just for a second, not speaking, not daring to look at each other. The air between us pulsed like a live wire. Then he stepped back. "Good night," he said, voice clipped. I wanted to answer. I wanted to reach. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there alone, the hallway empty again, the silence louder than any scream. I started to wonder how long we could keep this up, this quiet performance. This ritual of glances and distance and perfectly timed exits. We lived in the same house, shared the same air, but every room felt like it was holding its breath. And I was suffocating. The guilt clung to me like a second skin. I wore it while folding laundry, while scrubbing dishes, while listening to Mark ramble about work as if nothing inside me had changed. But I had changed. I had cracked open, and inside that crack, something was still glowing, small, guilty, but alive. The hardest part wasn't the kiss. It wasn't even the silence. It was the longing, the shameful, aching longing to feel that way again. To feel his presence in a room and know I mattered. To be wanted, not out of routine, but out of something real. And that was what I couldn't forgive myself for. Sometimes, I'd catch Corbin watching me when he thought I didn't see. Just a flicker, just enough to know he hadn't forgotten. And I hated it, but I also craved it. We were both haunted by the same thing, not what we did, but what it revealed, that the life we'd been told to live, the roles we'd been assigned, no longer fit. One afternoon, I walked past the hallway mirror and froze. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't scandalous. She wasn't reckless. She was starving. For connection. For warmth. For a truth she didn't have to bury in her own bones. Later that night, I found Corbin in the backyard, staring at the sky, hands buried in his pockets. I didn't plan to say anything, but the words came anyway. We can't keep pretending this didn't happen. He turned slowly, his eyes tired and open. I know. We stood there, the wind catching the edges of our shame, our confusion, our unspoken need. I'm not proud, I whispered, but I'm not sorry I felt something. He nodded, me neither. We didn't touch, we didn't move, but something passed between us, a shared truth, raw and unpolished, and in that moment, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like confession. In today's world, it's easy to disappear behind roles, spouse, parent, provider, while quietly starving for emotional connection. This story reminds us how dangerous silence can be when it replaces communication. If you feel unseen, don't wait until loneliness drives you to desperate choices. Speak up, tell your truth before it festers. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the doorway to healing. Ask for what you need. And if you're the one being asked, listen, truly listen, because often, the people we love aren't asking to be saved, they're asking to be seen. And sometimes, that can save both of you.